Ever lose your keys and wonder if reality itself is messing with you? Well, what if it's not just your keys? What if it's everything? What if this entire reality, the device you're listening to me on, the air you're breathing, even the mild disappointment you're already feeling about this video is actually just an elaborate computer program? I know how that sounds, like I'm that friend who discovered philosophy and weed in the same weekend. But here's the thing, some seriously smart people are taking this idea to heart. And I'm not talking about the tinfoil hat crowd. Today we're diving into the simulation argument, the unsettling possibility that you, me, and everything we know might be living inside some cosmic version of The Sims. Instead of being controlled by a bored teenager removing the swimming pool ladder, we're possibly the creation of a hyper-advanced civilization with computing power we can barely imagine. Comforting, right? The origins of the simulation hypothesis. The idea that reality might be an illusion isn't exactly breaking news. Philosophers have been questioning reality since reality was a thing. Plato described humans as prisoners watching shadows on a cave wall. Though to be fair, Plato never sat through a 3-hour Zoom meeting, so his understanding of suffering was limited. Descartes wondered if an evil demon might be deceiving him about the entire world. This was before social media, so he had to come up with conspiracy theories all by himself. Impressive, really. But the modern simulation argument was formalized in 2003 by philosopher Nick Bostrom, who clearly needed better hobbies. His argument wasn't just philosophical navel-gazing, it was a logical proposition based on 3 possibilities. 1. Civilizations like ours typically go extinct before developing the technology to create realistic simulations of conscious beings. Cheery thought, huh? 2. Advanced civilizations exist but have no interest in running simulations of their ancestors. Maybe they discovered TikTok and decided humanity wasn't worth recreating. 3. We are almost certainly living in a simulation. Why almost certainly? Because if civilizations can create ancestor simulations, they would likely create many of them, billions or trillions. And if that's the case, simulated minds would vastly outnumber real ones, making it statistically probable that we're among the simulated. Bostrom wasn't claiming we definitely live in a simulation. He was saying at least one of these 3 propositions must be true, and each is profound in its own way, though personally, I'm hoping for option 2. The idea that advanced civilizations took one look at our reality TV shows and said, nope, not simulating that, seems most plausible. Quantum pixelation, the universe's resolution limit. Let's start with something familiar. If you've ever worked with digital images or tried to zoom in too far on embarrassing vacation photos, when you zoom in far enough on a digital image, what happens? You start to see individual pixels. The continuous picture breaks down into discrete chunks, much like my self-esteem after reading YouTube comments. Now, what happens when physicists probe the smallest scales of our universe? They find something remarkably similar. And no, it's not their funding disappearing. At the Planck scale, about 10 to the negative 35th meters, unimaginably smaller than an atom, space itself appears to become pixelated. Energy, time, and space aren't continuous. They come in discrete units. This quantum granularity is eerily similar to the resolution limits of a digital simulation or my webcam during important Zoom calls. Think about it. If you were designing a universe simulation, you'd need to set a minimum scale, a pixel size for reality, to make the computation manageable. You couldn't simulate infinite detail with finite computing resources, just like I can't remember more than 3 items from the grocery store without a list. It gets stranger. In quantum mechanics, particles don't have definite properties until measured. An electron doesn't have a precise position until someone observes it. Before observation, it exists in a probabilistic cloud of possibilities, much like my weekend plans. Doesn't this sound like a clever programming trick? If you were running a universe simulation, you wouldn't waste processing power calculating the exact position of every particle at every moment. You'd only determine the precise details when someone is looking, when those details actually matter. It's like how I only clean my apartment when guests are coming over. The speed of light, a universal processing limit. Now, let's talk about the speed of light. The cosmic speed limit nothing can exceed, except maybe the rate at which I jump to conclusions. Why does this limit exist? Physicists have equations that describe it, but they can't tell us why it's there in the first place. It's like that mysterious speed limit sign on an empty highway. Who decided on that number and why? But if our universe is a simulation, the speed of light makes perfect sense. In any computer program, there's a limit to how quickly information can be processed. The speed of light could simply be the processing speed of whatever system is running our reality, probably better than my laptop, which starts to wheeze if I open more than 3 browser tabs. This also explains time dilation. Einstein showed that time moves slower in strong gravitational fields or at high speeds. Near a black hole, time nearly stops. From a simulation perspective, this makes perfect sense. Areas with complex physics require more processing power, so the simulation slows down time to compensate, just like your computer lags when running a demanding program. The more you look at it, the more the speed of light resembles a processing limitation rather than a natural law. It's as if the universe has a maximum frame rate beyond which reality can't be rendered fast enough. Kind of like how there's a maximum number of dad jokes I can tell before everyone leaves the room. Quantum entanglement, a programming shortcut. One of the most baffling phenomena in quantum physics is entanglement, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, which coincidentally is also what my neighbors call my dancing. When 2 particles become entangled, they share a connection that transcends space. Change one particle and its partner instantly responds, even if they're on opposite sides of the universe. It's like how my mom somehow knows I'm talking about her even when she's miles away. This seems to violate the speed of light limitation we just discussed. How can information travel between entangled particles instantaneously? But in a simulation, this paradox disappears. If our reality is running on some cosmic computer, entangled particles could simply be sharing the same line of code or memory address. They appear distant in the simulated 3D space, but in the program itself, they're right next to each other. Think about a video game where 2 objects on opposite sides of the virtual world are controlled by the same variable in the code. Change that variable, and both objects update simultaneously. No need for information to travel between them. Quantum entanglement, one of physics' most perplexing mysteries, becomes elegantly simple if we're living in a programmed reality. Though I wish my bank account was quantum entangled with my bills, so whenever one decreases, the other would too. Wave function collapse, rendering reality on demand. Let's go deeper into the double slit experiment. When scientists fire particles like electrons through 2 slits, something extraordinary happens. If no one observes which slit the particles go through, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern. But if someone watches, they behave like particles, creating 2 distinct bands. It's as if the particles know they're being watched and change their behavior accordingly, much like how I suddenly become productive when my boss walks by. This phenomenon, called wave function collapse, has baffled physicists for decades, but from a simulation perspective, it makes perfect sense. It's like a video game that only renders detailed graphics for the parts of the world the player is looking at. When no one's observing, the system uses a simpler, wave-like probability function. When someone looks, it calculates a specific position, saving enormous computational resources. This observer effect is one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the simulation hypothesis. It suggests our reality follows the same optimization principles that any well-designed simulation would use, unlike my life, which seems to follow the optimization principles of a squirrel on espresso. Computational constraints and the nature of reality. You might be thinking, simulating an entire universe would require unimaginable computing power. How could any civilization manage it? That's a good point. I can barely simulate interest in my relatives' vacation stories. Simulating every particle in the universe would require approximately 10 to the power of 80 operations, far beyond what we can currently imagine, and roughly equivalent to the number of times I've said just 5 more minutes before getting out of bed. But here's the thing, a simulation doesn't need to model everything at once. It only needs to render what's being observed. Think about modern video games. They don't calculate every detail simultaneously. They use techniques like occlusion culling to avoid rendering objects that aren't visible. It's like how I put all my effort into cleaning the parts of my apartment visitors will see, while that mysterious laundry pile grows behind my bedroom door. Our universe could work the same way. The simulation might only fully render the parts we're directly experiencing, while using simplified models for everything else. This lossy compression approach would make an otherwise impossible simulation manageable. Kind of like how summarizing a 3-hour meeting into nothing important happened makes my workday manageable. The fine-tuning problem, a programmer's constants. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the simulation hypothesis is what physicists call the fine-tuning problem. The fundamental constants of our universe, like the strength of gravity or the charge of an electron, appear to be precisely calibrated to allow for the existence of life. If any of these constants were even slightly different, stars couldn't form, atoms couldn't exist, and life as we know it would be impossible. The odds of all these constants randomly having life-permitting values are astronomically small, about as likely as me actually using that gym membership I bought in January. This fine-tuning has led some to invoke a divine creator, but it could just as easily suggest a programmer who set these parameters deliberately to create an interesting simulation, one where intelligent life could evolve and eventually make YouTube videos questioning its own existence. Meta, right? These constants function exactly like the parameters in a computer program. They're the settings that determine how the simulation runs, and they appear to be tuned with remarkable precision, as if someone wanted to ensure that the simulation would produce complex structures and conscious beings. Or maybe they just got lucky, like when I accidentally make something edible while cooking. Dark matter and dark energy, unrendered portions? Here's another curious fact. According to our best measurements, about 95% of the universe is made up of dark matter and dark energy, substances we can't directly observe and don't fully understand. It's like the mysterious other category in my monthly budget that somehow consumes most of my money. Dark matter doesn't interact with light, but we can detect its gravitational effects. Dark energy is even more mysterious, a force causing the universe's expansion to accelerate. Scientists have been studying these phenomena for decades and still don't fully understand them, which makes me feel better about not understanding how to use my air fryer after 6 months. From a simulation perspective, dark matter and dark energy could represent background processes or placeholder code, parts of the simulation that aren't fully rendered but are necessary for the physics engine to function correctly. Think of it like the invisible collision meshes in a video game. You can't see them, but they're essential for making the game world behave realistically. Dark matter and dark energy could be the cosmic equivalent, computational shortcuts that maintain the simulation's integrity without requiring full rendering. The fact that these mysterious substances make up the vast majority of our universe is telling. If our reality is a simulation, it makes sense that most of it would consist of computational frameworks rather than fully rendered content. After all, why waste processing power on parts of the universe no one's looking at? It's the cosmic equivalent of stuffing all your clutter into closets before guests arrive. Prominent scientists and their views. It's not just fringe theorists who take the simulation hypothesis seriously. Some of the world's most respected scientists have considered this possibility. which is reassuring, because I'd hate to be the only one lying awake wondering if my reality is just someone else's video game. Neil deGrasse Tyson has stated that he thinks the odds are pretty high that our universe is a simulation. His reasoning: if any civilization can create realistic simulations, they would likely create many of them, making simulated realities more numerous than base reality. Though, if they're simulating me specifically, I'd like to apologize to the programmer who has to watch me spend 20 minutes deciding what to watch on Netflix only to rewatch The Office again. Max Tegmark, a physicist at MIT, has proposed the mathematical universe hypothesis, suggesting that reality is fundamentally a mathematical structure. This aligns with the simulation hypothesis, as both view the universe as a computational construct. Though, if the universe is mathematical, I wish it would help me calculate my taxes. Even Elon Musk has famously stated that there's only a 1 in billions chance that we're living in base reality rather than a simulation. His reasoning: the rate at which video game technology has advanced suggests that eventually simulations will be indistinguishable from reality. Though, if we're in a simulation designed by Musk, that would explain why my self-driving car keeps trying to take me to Mars. Testing the simulation hypothesis. You might be wondering, if we're in a simulation, can we prove it? I know I'd like to have a word with whoever programmed my metabolism. Scientists have proposed several approaches. One involves looking for lattice artifacts, patterns in cosmic rays that might reveal the underlying grid of the simulation. Just as a digital image might show pixelation when stretched, our reality might show similar artifacts at extreme scales. Though, knowing my luck, if we do find evidence we're in a simulation, it'll turn out to be a free mobile game with unskippable ads. Another approach focuses on quantum noise limits. If our reality has a finite resolution, there should be a limit to how precisely we can measure certain quantities. Finding these limits could provide evidence for the discreteness of space-time that a simulation would require. Some researchers have even suggested looking for bugs or inconsistencies in the laws of physics, moments where the simulation's code might reveal itself through glitches. If my life is any indication, the simulation already has plenty of bugs. I mean, who programs shoelaces to spontaneously untie themselves? The challenge is that a sufficiently advanced simulation would be designed to hide its true nature. Any glitches might be indistinguishable from natural phenomena we don't yet understand. And if the simulators don't want us to discover we're in a simulation, they could simply patch any exploits we might find. Quantum supremacy and simulation within simulation. In recent years, we've witnessed remarkable advancements in quantum computing. Google's quantum computer achieved quantum supremacy in 2019, performing calculations that would take traditional supercomputers thousands of years to complete. Meanwhile, I still struggle to calculate the tip at restaurants without using my phone. But here's where things get meta. If we're developing the ability to create increasingly sophisticated simulations ourselves, doesn't that strengthen the case that we might be in one? If any civilization can create realistic simulations, the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the single base reality. This creates a recursive logic. Our ability to simulate complex systems suggests that we ourselves might be a simulation, and if we are, the simulators might themselves be simulated. It could be simulations all the way up, nested like Russian dolls, or my procrastination excuses. This possibility raises fascinating questions about consciousness. If we can create simulations with conscious entities, and we ourselves are simulated, then consciousness might be something that can exist across different levels of reality, a pattern of information processing rather than something tied to specific physical substrates. Though, if consciousness is just information processing, I wish mine would process information about where I left my keys. The observer effect, reality rendered on demand. Let's return to one of the most compelling pieces of evidence, the observer effect in quantum mechanics. This phenomenon is so strange that even Einstein struggled with its implications, famously asking whether the moon exists when no one is looking at it. To be fair, I've asked similar questions about the food in my refrigerator. If consciousness itself is what triggers the rendering of definite reality from probability waves, it suggests that consciousness might be fundamental to how the simulation works, perhaps even its purpose. Though if the simulation is centered around my consciousness specifically, I apologize for all the time it's spent watching cat videos. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics explicitly propose that consciousness causes wave function collapse. If true, this would suggest that the simulation is designed to respond specifically to conscious observation, rendering reality for the benefit of conscious entities. In our earlier example with a video game, the most detailed rendering happens around the player character, the conscious entity experiencing the simulation. The rest is background, rendered with less detail. Our reality might operate on similar principles, with consciousness serving as the focal point around which the simulation renders detail. Though in my case, the simulation seems to have spent more time rendering my receding hairline than my bank account. The mathematical nature of reality. One of the most compelling aspects of the simulation hypothesis is how it explains the deeply mathematical nature of our universe. As physicist Eugene Wegner noted, it's strangely convenient how well mathematical formulas describe physical reality. Almost suspiciously convenient, like finding out your blind date is both attractive and interested in your obscure hobbies. From Einstein's E equals mc squared to quantum field theory, mathematics seems to be the language in which the universe is written. But why should abstract mathematical concepts map so perfectly onto physical reality? It's as puzzling as why my dog seems to understand exactly when I'm about to open treats, but pretends not to hear me when I call his name. If we're in a simulation, the answer is obvious. Our reality is built on mathematics because it literally is mathematical, a computational construct. The mathematics isn't just describing reality, it is reality. It's like realizing that the map and the territory are the same thing, which would be helpful because I get lost using both. This would explain why physicists keep finding mathematical patterns throughout nature. These patterns aren't coincidences. They're the underlying code of the simulation showing through. Glitches in the matrix, anomalies and unexplained phenomena. If we are in a simulation, might there be glitches in the system? Just as software has bugs, our simulated reality might occasionally show signs of its artificial nature. If the number of times I've walked into a room and forgotten why I'm there is any indication, the glitches are abundant. Some suggest that unexplained phenomena, from déjà vu to the Mandela effect, where large groups share false memories, might be glitches in the simulation. Personally, I'm convinced the simulation glitched when it created hairless cats. There's no way those were intentional. More scientifically, physicists have noted anomalies that don't fit neatly into our current understanding of physics. The flyby anomaly, where spacecraft experience unexpected changes in velocity during Earth flybys, remains unexplained. Could these be signs of imperfections in the simulation? Or maybe the programmer just spilled coffee on their keyboard while coding that part of the universe. Even consciousness itself, the hard problem of how physical brain processes create subjective experience, might be easier to explain if we're in a simulation. Perhaps consciousness isn't produced by the brain at all, but is a direct interface with the simulation. If my consciousness is an interface, I'd like to request a better user manual, because I still haven't figured out how to operate it properly. Ethical implications, the responsibilities of simulators. If we are in a simulation, what ethical responsibilities would the simulators have toward us? This question mirrors our own emerging debates about the ethics of creating conscious AI or virtual worlds. Though I'm not sure I want to know what kind of ethics review board approved my particular life simulation. If simulated beings can experience suffering, as we certainly seem to, then creating a simulation raises serious ethical questions. Would it be moral to create billions of conscious entities who experience pain, loss, and death just to observe them? If so, I'd like to file a complaint about the male pattern baldness and anxiety features they included in my character design. Perhaps the simulators have their own ethical framework that justifies creating our world. Maybe they see the simulation as ultimately beneficial, providing experiences that lead to growth. Or perhaps they view simulated suffering as fundamentally different from real suffering, though that distinction might seem meaningless to those experiencing it. It's like how my cat probably doesn't appreciate my philosophical justifications for taking him to the vet. Living meaningfully in a simulated reality. How should we live if there's a real possibility that our reality is simulated? Besides asking for a better character model and more cheat codes, of course. First, we should maintain epistemic humility, recognizing that we don't know for certain whether we're in a simulation and that both possibilities deserve serious consideration. It's like how I'm open to the possibility that I might someday use all those containers I've saved, even though deep down I know I won't. Second, meaning and value exist regardless of whether our reality is base or simulated. Your experiences, relationships, and achievements have subjective significance that isn't diminished by the underlying nature of reality. The joy of watching a sunset isn't less real if the sunset is rendered by advanced computation rather than physical processes, though I would appreciate if the simulation could render fewer mosquitoes during those sunset moments. Third, we might find purpose in the possibility that our lives contribute to something larger, whether that's the evolution of consciousness or the generation of experiences that have value to whoever created the simulation. Living with curiosity, compassion, and creativity seems worthwhile, regardless of the ultimate nature of our reality. If the simulators are studying human behavior through me, I apologize for all the time they've had to watch me scroll mindlessly through social media. Conclusion: the ultimate question. We've explored quantum physics, computational theory, and philosophy, examining the evidence that our reality might be a sophisticated simulation. From the pixelated nature of space to the mathematical patterns that permeate physics, from the observer effect to the fine-tuning of universal constants, there are indeed curious hints that our universe might be more digital than we once thought. But perhaps the most profound aspect of the simulation hypothesis isn't whether it's true, but what it reveals about human curiosity and our quest to understand existence. The simulation hypothesis represents a modern framework that bridges science, philosophy, and religion, using the metaphor of computation to explore age-old questions about the nature of reality. It's like how I use the metaphor of adulting to pretend I know what I'm doing with my life. Whether we're in a simulation or not, the question itself prompts us to look at the world with fresh eyes, to see the patterns, the mathematics, and the strange quantum behaviors as potential clues to the deeper nature of existence. And if we are in a simulation, then perhaps the greatest compliment we can pay to our simulators is to create our own simulations, to explore our own virtual worlds, to continue the recursive process of reality creation. Though, if they're watching me specifically, I hope they're not judging my browser history too harshly. So the next time you look up at the stars or marvel at the mathematical elegance of nature, consider that you might be witnessing the code of creation itself. And if you notice a glitch, maybe don't report it. Who knows what the patch might change, and I've just gotten used to this version of reality, bugs and all. Whether that code was written by a programmer, emerged through natural processes, or exists in some form we can't yet comprehend, the wonder of experiencing it remains the same. Thanks for joining me on this mind-bending journey. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm, and maybe it sends a signal to our simulators that you'd like more existential crises in your feed. Until next time, keep questioning reality and maybe save your game progress regularly, just in case.